No one expected it. Not on a day scripted down to the second, but as the royal procession moved past the gates of Buckingham Palace, one small figure broke formation. Princess Charlotte, usually composed beyond her years, stepped out of line, and for a brief moment, the world held its breath. The cameras caught it. The crowd gasped. But it was Prince William's reaction, soft, almost hidden behind his ceremonial composure, that revealed something deeper. A promise, a private one, a family one. And the story behind it is far more emotional than anyone realized. Before we unravel this beautiful moment, tap like if you love seeing the human side of the royal family. And if you enjoy emotional royal stories, you might want to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Feel free to share this with someone who follows William, Kate, and the kids. You never know whose heart this story might touch. The day had started with the kind of precision the royal family is famous for. Timelines memorized, routes secured, and formations rehearsed down to the smallest detail. London shimmered under a pale, almost silver light, the sort that makes everything look a touch more regal. The sound of horses' boots and the distant hum of an anticipating crowd blended into a rhythmic heartbeat pulsing through the capital. And right in the center of that perfectly orchestrated moment was Princess Charlotte. From a distance, she looked every inch the young royal. Posture straight, gaze forward, step small but confident. A gentle breeze teased the fabric of her coat as she walked beside her brothers, George and Louis, their expressions a mixture of solemn duty and childlike curiosity. But then, something shifted. It happened quietly, almost like a thought escaping before it could be caught. Charlotte's eyes flicked toward the left side of the crowd. Someone had called her name. Or maybe it was just the way a young girl's attention is naturally pulled by warmth. A group of children waving homemade signs, drawings of her, Kate, and the corgi scribbled in bright marker. Whatever it was, the moment caught her heart first, and her feet followed. She stepped out of formation, not a stumble, not a hesitation, a clear, deliberate step. The royal guards noticed it instantly. Of course they did. Their training demanded unwavering focus. Their movement stayed sharp, their eyes fixed forward, but subtle tension traveled through their stance. A protocol break, especially during a ceremonial procession, is no small thing. Even the horses responded with a slight twitch of their ears. The crowd reacted too. Gasps rippled forward like a wave. A few phones tilted, scrambling to catch the moment. There was a kind of suspended disbelief. Because Princess Charlotte doesn't usually make mistakes. She is known for her poise, for that uncanny composure that mirrors both William's calm and Kate's quiet strength. And then, as if aware she had crossed an invisible line, Charlotte froze. Her breath caught. Her shoulders tightened. The weight of 1,000 cameras focused on her tiny frame. She turned her head just slightly, just enough, to search for one person. Her father. Prince William walked a step ahead. He had been focused on the ceremonial path, on the rhythm of the march, on maintaining the face every royal must wear during a state moment. But then he sensed it. Charlotte's shift, the pause, the crowd's whisper. He glanced back, and what happened in that instant is what made this moment unforgettable. His reaction wasn't sharp, not stern, not the controlled neutrality that protocol might have encouraged. Instead, William's expression softened, just for a heartbeat, a flicker, a quiet, unmistakable warmth. He didn't speak, couldn't, not in the middle of the procession, but his eyes told her everything. It's all right. I'm here. You're safe. Remember what we talked about? Charlotte straightened, nodding slightly, as if responding to a silent reminder. She slipped back into formation, adjusting her steps to match the pace again. The guards relaxed by a degree so small it would be invisible to most. The horses steadied. The world breathed again. But that little moment, barely 2 seconds, held far more meaning than anyone realized. Because this wasn't just a child drifting off track. This wasn't simply a break in royal choreography. Behind William's softened expression, behind Charlotte's quick return to duty, lay a private family promise made long before this day. A promise only the four of them knew. The procession continued its slow, ceremonial glide down the boulevard. Music swelled from the marching band, a dignified brass echo floating across the palace grounds. The crowd cheered again, as though collectively deciding to move past the moment. But those who were paying attention, really paying attention, felt something tender linger in the air. Charlotte kept her eyes forward the rest of the way, but she walked with a slightly different posture. Calmer, more grounded, more certain. And while George stayed focused and Lewis, who always had a spark of mischief simmering behind his expressions, kept trying to look sideways at her, Charlotte held her place with quiet dignity. Still, you could tell she was thinking, remembering, reflecting on whatever that exchanged glance had meant. As the procession neared the palace gates, the royal guards shifted their stance for the final turn. Sunlight hit their polished helmets like scattered diamonds. Their uniforms, crimson red with gold trimming, looked almost unreal in the glow. But beneath all that sharp discipline, even they recognized something significant had happened. A few of the senior guards understood the old traditions well enough to know. A young royal breaking formation isn't about the misstep. It's about what it reveals: courage, vulnerability, instinct. Qualities that for centuries were often hidden behind protocol. But this generation of royals, they're changing things slowly but meaningfully. As the gates opened and the procession entered the palace grounds, William drifted closer to Charlotte. Not visibly, not dramatically, just enough so that when the crowds were out of sight, he could reach down discreetly, and he placed a gentle hand on her back. A father's gesture, a reassurance, a quiet acknowledgement that she did nothing wrong. Charlotte's shoulders eased. She blinked up at him with that familiar, clever spark, the one the world has seen during balcony waves and school drop-offs. William gave a small, almost hidden smile before turning his hand to his side. For a moment, Charlotte looked ahead again, deeper in thought. And if you watched closely, you'd see something change in her expression. Something subtle. Something rooted in memory. Because years ago, long before cameras were pointed at her, before she understood what being a princess meant, William made a promise to his children. One shaped by his own childhood, his mother's influence, and the lessons that shaped him into the father he is now. A promise that carried both emotion and responsibility. A promise that would explain exactly why he reacted the way he did, and why Charlotte breaking formation wasn't the simple slip-up the world assumed. By the time the family reached the palace steps, the moment had faded from the crowd's mind, but not from William's, not from Charlotte's, and certainly not from those who sensed that something deeper had quietly unfolded in front of millions. Because sometimes the smallest gestures, like a child stepping out of line, reveal the biggest truths about a family. And this one was only the beginning. Long before the world saw Princess Charlotte step out of formation, long before that whisper of moment caught global attention, the heart of the story began inside a quiet room at Kensington Palace, a place the public never sees, but one that holds some of the family's most private memories. It was a winter evening, the kind where the palace corridors felt softer, wrapped in a hush that only old buildings seemed to understand. William had finished a long day of engagements, the kind that tested even his steady composure. But when he stepped inside the children's playroom, something shifted instantly. Charlotte, then much younger, sat on the floor beside George. Lewis was still a toddler, wobbling around with a stuffed corgi in his hand. The fire crackled. Toys lay scattered. And in that moment, the formality of royal life melted away. Kate looked up at William with the kind of smile that said, "You're home now." And that was where the promise began. It started as a conversation about the children's future, about the pressures they would face, the expectations, the spotlight that never really goes dark. William had lived through it all himself. He knew how heavy it could feel. He knew how confusing it could be for a child to carry a role the world decided for them before they could even speak. But more than anything, he remembered his mother, Diana, her laughter, her kindness, the way she kneeled down to a child's level no matter the event or the cameras or the protocol. She had always told him and Harry one thing that stayed carved in his heart. If you feel something is right, even if it breaks the script, follow your heart. Those words had shaped him, saved him in many ways. So that night, sitting on the floor beside Charlotte, George, and Lewis, William made a decision that would become a promise. One not written on paper, not part of any public speech, but spoken quietly between four people who mattered most. "Listen," he said softly, drawing their attention. You'll grow up with lots of rules. Lots of people telling you how to stand, how to wave, how to smile, when to talk, when not to talk. But I want you to remember something, all of you. Charlotte leaned against him. George sat up straighter, and Louis clung to Kate's hand with wide eyes. You are allowed to be children, William continued, even when the world is watching. Kate nodded gently. And if you ever feel lost or scared, or if something catches your heart, look for us. We're always here. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't ceremonial. It was the kind of promise families make in moments that feel ordinary but mean everything. Charlotte, young as she was, took it to heart in a way that surprised even William. She was brave, curious, and full of that spark Diana once carried. A spark the cameras couldn't hide even if they tried. But there was a second part to the promise, one that mattered even more to her. William leaned closer to his daughter and lowered his voice. And if you ever step out of line, literally or figuratively, it's okay. Just look at me. I'll tell you what to do. Her tiny hand reached for his, a small gesture, but powerful enough to imprint itself in his memory. From that day on, Charlotte rarely needed reassurance. She became the one who gently nudged Louis when he waved too wildly, the one who reminded George which direction to turn during ceremonies. Poised, composed, thoughtful, she embraced her role with surprising instinct, which is why what happened during the procession was so striking. She remembered the promise, and she acted on it. But the real weight of that promise wasn't just emotional. It was shaped by William's past. Growing up, his own moments of breaking formation had rarely been seen as innocent. A misplaced glance, a stumble, even a moment of distraction became headlines. When he was Charlotte's age, he once slipped his hand out of Diana's during an event, just for a second, and the next day newspapers speculated that he was struggling with royal duties. He never forgot how confusing that felt. And when Diana passed, the spotlight intensified. Every misstep became a symbol of something bigger. Every expression was analyzed. Every shrug, every blink, every tilt of the head. He didn't want that for his children. That is why the promise mattered. It was not just a reassurance. It was a shield, a quiet one, a personal one, a way of telling them that even in the most public moments, they still had space to be human. But there was something else behind the promise, too. Something tender, something shaped by grief and resilience. William had always felt responsible for continuing Diana's teachings, especially the part she lived most fiercely. To remain human in a world that often demands perfection. Kate understood this deeply. She supported it wholeheartedly. In many ways, she helped build the emotional environment where that promise could thrive. She made sure the children learned kindness before protocol, empathy before posture, laughter before elegance, which is exactly why Charlotte's step out of formation was a mistake. It was instinct. She saw those children waving. She felt that pull of connection, something Diana knew well, something William recognized instantly, and he didn't forget the promise. That's why his reaction was so gentle, why his expression softened instead of tightened, why his eyes didn't reprimand. They reassured, because he knew exactly what was happening behind her small, brave face. She wasn't misbehaving. She wasn't being careless. She wasn't ignoring protocol. She was being herself, following her heart for a moment before remembering the structure around her. And William honored that with the same compassion Diana once showed him. After the procession ended, when the family retreated inside the palace, Charlotte walked close to William, not because she was afraid or embarrassed. She wasn't either of those things, but because she had something to confirm. She tugged lightly at his sleeve. "Was that okay?" she whispered. William leaned down, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You remembered the promise," he murmured. "You looked at me, and you came back when you were ready." Charlotte nodded, reassured. Kate, watching from the side, smiled softly. She knew this moment would stay with Charlotte far longer than the cameras or headlines, because when a child learns that love anchors them more strongly than rules, that's a lesson that lasts. And that quiet promise, made in a warm room years ago, had just revealed itself to the world in the most unexpected way. A step out of formation, a father's soft look, a daughter's trust. The beginning of a story no one knew they were watching. From the outside, a royal procession looked smooth, almost effortless. Precision, rhythm, ceremony, a long red river of uniforms and discipline. But inside that river is a world of tension most people never see, especially among the royal guards. And on the day Princess Charlotte stepped out of formation, that tension rose like a breath caught too high in the chest. Because for the guards, duty isn't symbolic. It's absolute. Every step, every turn, every tiny movement has a purpose. They train for years to ensure nothing, truly nothing, breaks the formation. Not a shout from the crowd, not a sudden gust of wind, not even the presence of royalty inches from their elbows. And especially not a deviation from the royal line. That's why the moment Charlotte drifted out of alignment, just one step, the tension rippled before anyone else even noticed. The guards felt it. They always do. Behind their expressionless faces and unblinking focus, there's an entire system of response. It's invisible to the public, but unmistakable to the trained eye. A slight shift of the jaw, a small tightening around the eyes, a fractional turn of the shoulders. On that day, the front row of guards caught Charlotte's movement first, not with shock, not with panic, but with protocol. One guard in particular, positioned just ahead, was responsible for monitoring the formation from the corner of his eye. He saw Charlotte step out, saw her move toward the cheering children, and in that instant, every instinct he had told him to prepare for correction. A break in royal alignment is serious. It opens security gaps. It disrupts timing. It exposes vulnerabilities. It demands a response. But seconds later, he saw something else. He saw Prince William turn. And his reaction, soft, calm, measured, told the guard everything he needed to know. This wasn't an emergency. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't danger. This was family. The guard inhaled, slow and steady, releasing that silent tension only the well-trained can hide. His fellow guards followed suit, staying perfectly still, but internally adjusting to a moment that protocol never truly prepares for. Because although the guards guard the monarchy, they also understand the humanity within it. But that doesn't mean the moment passed without consequence. After the procession ended, when the royal family had entered the palace and the gates closed behind them, the guards continued their duties. But the incident lingered in the air like a faint echo. Inside the guardroom, a private space where the public never has access, the conversation was quiet but inevitable. Uniforms hung neatly on wooden racks. Polished helmets lined the wall like silver sentinels. And the men stood together, decompressing from the intensity of the event. One guard broke the silence with a low exhale. "She stepped out clean, didn't she?" Another nodded. One step, maybe two. Sharp little thing, though. Came right back. I saw His Royal Highness look back. Gentle as ever. Made all the difference. They weren't criticizing her. They weren't annoyed. There was almost admiration. Because behind the layers of discipline, guards are human too. They have families, children, moments when the world expects perfection from people who are still learning how to grow. One of the older guards, a veteran with more years of service than most, leaned against the oak table and spoke in a measured voice. "Protocol's there for a reason," he said. "Keeps everyone safe. But the young princess, she's got spirit, and His Highness handled it right." A younger guard asked, "You think it'll go noted in training reports?" The older man shook his head. "Not everything belongs on paper." His words settled like dust in sunlight, quiet, steady, unshakable. Because in that moment, every guard understood something. Protocol protects the crown, yes, but compassion protects the people who carry it. Still, even if the guards accepted the moment internally, the tension around the break wasn't just emotional. It had a structural reason. Every procession relies on absolute timing. If one royal moves unexpectedly, three things happen behind the scenes. 1. Security shifts. Guards must adjust formation to cover gaps, however small. Even a child stepping off the line affects movement patterns. 2. Cameras pivot. And with cameras come global eyes, which means the guards know the moment could explode online within minutes. 3. Command receives notice. Supervisors monitoring from various vantage points immediately logged the deviation, planning for any required adjustment afterward. So when Charlotte stepped out, these entire systems flickered to life. But then came William's glance, calm, reassuring, and everything recalibrated instantly. His reaction told the guards what no instruction manual could. Stand down. She's safe. She's aware. She's coming back. And that subtle communication between royalty and guards is something civilians rarely understand. It's not spoken. It's not signaled. It's instinctive. Years of shared space and trained reading of body language create a kind of silent dance, one that worked perfectly that day. But the unspoken tension wasn't only among the guards. Protocol experts watching from afar, those who analyze every movement of the royal family, felt it too. They know what it means when a young royal breaks formation, even slightly. Not scandal, not misbehavior. Something far more interesting. It reveals personality. Prince George is cautious, thoughtful, diplomatic even at his age. Prince Louis is spirited, unpredictable, full of charm and mischief. Princess Charlotte, however, is balanced, disciplined and curious at once. She respects structure, but still listens to her instincts. And in royal tradition, that blend is rare. Very rare. Protocol analysts saw her step out and instantly recognized the significance. She wasn't rebelling. She wasn't distressed. She wasn't overwhelmed. She was responding to people, to emotion, to humanity. The very thing Diana once embodied, and the very thing William promised to preserve. Later that afternoon, after the family had changed out of their ceremonial outfits and the palace corridors quieted again, Charlotte walked into the sitting room, where William and Kate were speaking softly with one of the senior staff members. She paused at the doorway. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice small but steady. William turned and beckoned her closer. "Come here, sweetheart." She walked in carefully, perhaps worried she had caused trouble. But William pulled her gently into a hug. "You're fine," he said. "You followed your heart. And then you remembered where you needed to be. That's what matters." Kate wrapped an arm around both of them. "Everyone saw your kindness," she whispered. "And kindness is never wrong." Charlotte relaxed, finally letting go of the tension she'd been carrying since the procession. Because even though the guards had managed it professionally, even though William had handled it gently, even though the moment had passed, a child's heart always wonders. William kissed the top of her head. "Next time, just stay close. But never be afraid to feel something. That's not a mistake." And that reassurance, given behind closed palace doors, settled the last thread of tension from the day. Outside, the guards returned to their posts. Inside, the family returned to their lives. One world built on precision, the other built on love. And somewhere between the two, a young princess learned that even in the most structured moments, humanity still has a place. By the time evening settled over London, the moment had already gone viral. Clips of Princess Charlotte stepping out of formation spread across social media faster than the marching band's final notes faded. Some viewers saw it as adorable. Others framed it as a symbolic break. And many, far more than the palace expected, felt something deeper, something emotional, as if they witnessed a small crack of humanity inside a world built on marble and tradition. Because sometimes it takes just one step to make millions look twice. It began with a single video captioned, "Princess Charlotte breaks formation. William's reaction says it all." Within hours, the clip was everywhere. On phones, on news sites, in comment sections stacked thousands deep. People noticed details most would have missed during the live broadcast. Charlotte's careful expression, the way her coat swayed as she moved, the gentle smile William gave when he turned toward her. Parents commented first, "She's just a child." Good on William for that gentle look. "My daughter would have done the same. Kids follow kindness." Others pointed out how unshaken the royal guard seemed, how their professionalism remained flawless despite the unexpected moment. It sparked admiration, even awe. Look how the guards didn't even twitch. That's discipline. They protected her space without smothering it. And then came the deeper interpretations. This wasn't a mistake. This looked like instinct. There's something Diana-like in that little moment. William looked at her the way Diana looked at him. Kindness first, protocol second. But none of the public guesses came close to the real truth, the private promise behind it all. What millions didn't know was that Charlotte stepping off her line wasn't just a child distraction. It was a quiet echo of her father's lessons, whispered behind palace walls long before this day. It was a spirit of kindness that William and Kate had spent years nurturing inside their home. And it was a legacy of Diana, resurfacing in a new generation more gently and more powerfully than anyone expected. Inside the palace, the family gathered for the evening meal. The table was more casual than people imagined. No extravagant gold cutlery, no formality for the sake of formality. Just a family decompressing after a long day. Kate ladled soup into Charlotte's bowl. George passed a plate of bread. Louis told a story that had almost nothing to do with reality, but absolutely held everyone's attention. William watched them with quiet pride. But then Charlotte looked up at him, cheeks flushed from the warmth of the dining room. "What do they say online?" she asked, the question careful, almost whispered. Kate exchanged a glance with William. They knew this question would come. They also knew they couldn't hide the world forever, not from a child who was already learning what it meant to be in the public eye. William leaned forward, elbows on the table, hands clasped gently. "Most people were kind," he said. "They understood you saw something in the crowd. They saw you being human." Charlotte blinked, processing it. Kate reached over, brushing a stray hair from her daughter's cheek. "What matters is how you feel, not what strangers think." Charlotte hesitated, then nodded. "I didn't mean to mess up." "You didn't," William answered instantly. "You listened to your heart, and then you remembered the moment you were in. That balance is something grown-ups struggle with." Her shoulders eased. Her smile returned, small but warm. Louis chimed in with perfect timing. "I liked it. It looked cool." George smacked his arm lightly. "She's not trying to be cool, Lou." But Charlotte laughed. And the sound in that room, a child's light, unburdened laughter, was all the reassurance William needed. Later that night, after the children went to bed, William stepped out onto the palace balcony. The air was crisp. The city lights glowed in a soft haze, drifting across the skyline. He folded his hands on the railing and exhaled slowly. He wasn't thinking about headlines or trending videos. He was thinking about that glance he'd given Charlotte. How natural it felt. How instinctive. How Diana would have done the same without a second thought. Kate joined him a moment later, her footsteps soft against the stone. She slipped her arm through his and leaned her head against his shoulder. "She handled it well," Kate murmured. "She did," William agreed. "Better than I did at her age." Kate chuckled softly. "You had more pressure, more eyes, less support." William didn't respond to that, not immediately, because a part of him still wondered what his mother would say if she saw moments like today. Would she smile? Would she whisper that famous reassurance she gave him as a child? "You don't have to follow every rule when your heart knows the truth." Kate spoke again, quieter now. "She's growing into her own. She has your courage and your mother's warmth." William closed his eyes for a second. That meant more than she knew. And then he said something Kate had never heard him say out loud, though she'd always sensed it beneath his actions. "I made them a promise," he whispered, "that they'd always be allowed to be children before they're royals." Kate squeezed his arm. "And today you kept it." Meanwhile, across London, reactions continued pouring in, news anchors discussing the moment of authenticity, commentators praising William's gentle parenting, people around the world sharing how unexpectedly emotional they felt watching a young princess simply be a child. Some moments were funny, some were sweet, but one comment, written beneath a widely shared clip, captured something bigger, something many people had sensed but couldn't articulate. This wasn't a break in formation. This was a moment where a father protected a child, even when millions were watching. It resonated. It spread. And soon, people saw the moment differently, not as a breach of protocol, but as a window into a family trying to stay grounded in a life that rarely allows it. Days later, the palace moved on. So did the world. But the story lingered, not in scandal or controversy, but in a rare kind of warmth. A glimpse of real life inside royal ceremony. A reminder that behind the uniforms, the schedules, the centuries-old traditions, there are human hearts learning, trusting, growing. And for Charlotte, that day planted something inside her she'd remember for years, a confidence shaped not by perfection, but by reassurance. A reminder that even when the world expects her to walk in a straight line, she has a father who will guide her back gently, a mother who will protect her tenderness, and a legacy of compassion she carries without even realizing it. The moment wasn't about breaking formation. It was about keeping a promise. And sometimes, the smallest step out of line reveals the biggest truth. Even in the most royal of families, love still leads.